Episode 3. Suburban Life. Clad in an apron, a pretty house dress, and a bow in her hair, Cassie Bergdahl looked like the all-American housewife. She had the news on as she carefully poured boiling water into 2 bowls of oatmeal. According to the news, a dead body in a clown suit had just been found in the Mississippi near a casino boat. The TV showed a team of river rescuers hoisting the dead clown onto their boat. Early reports indicated the clown may have caught his face in a propeller blade, so the head was blurred out for sensitive viewers. Unsettled, Cassie grabbed the remote and shut the TV off. All she could think of was that demon. Ever since that demon turned up, stories like this occurred way more often than they should. Sure, the dead clown was found over in the next state, but it had that demon's name written all over it. Finished stirring the oatmeal, Cassie looked at the knot that used to be her right hand. Her fingers had healed all wrong, and now the gnarled hand was next to useless. That being said, Cassie had gotten pretty good at doing almost everything exclusively with her left hand. Ironic. The demon had rendered useless Cassie's right hand, the one reserved for the Lord, and forced her to use her sinister side. Isn't that always the way? Cassie could almost hear her pastor's voice. Satan and his minions are bound and determined to draw us into the darkness away from the light, towards the left and away from the right. Cassie had not been able to make church recently, and Pastor Willie left her a voicemail, wondering where she had been. Cassie needed to make an intention for church this Sunday. No more excuses, no more procrastination. She would make it a church no matter what that demon did or... Cassie jumped when she heard the demon's voice behind her. "Sup, Miss Cassie?" Gia's voice chimed. Cassie turned and laughed nervously. Gia was walking into the room on her hands, her dark curls dangling halfway to the floor. "I didn't hear you come home," Cassie said weakly. "But perfect timing. I've got oatmeal." Gia hand walked up to one of the dining room chairs, lowered herself so the top of her head touched the floor, then arm jumped up to the chair. She turned to face front, then lowered her body like a gymnast, pushing her legs between her arms into a seated position. Cassie masked her distaste. There was nothing natural about this girl, nothing human. She truly was a demon that was indestructible. Cassie and her late husband Jake, the only man she had ever loved, found that out the hard way. Cassie found out with her right hand. Jake, with his life. Cassie brought Gia's bowl over and placed it on the kitchen table in front of her. She waited as Gia leaned over and gave the oatmeal a long smell. She looked up at Cassie. Then she smiled. "Smells good." Cassie brought her own bowl over to the table, and the two ate in silence as they usually did. Gia's arm muscles rippled insidiously under that knit shirt she had on. As they ate, Cassie kept those bursting arm muscles in her periphery, the way prisoners keep the guards in their periphery. "They pulled a dead clown body out of the Mississippi a little while ago," Cassie mentioned. Gia snickered a little. "A dead body is funny?" Cassie asked, wide-eyed. Gia looked up at Cassie. "Hello." "It was a clown," Gia said with a mouthful of oatmeal. "Clowns are funny." Gia stared Cassie down. This was hell. It surely was. Some days Cassie really wanted to join her husband. Maybe today would be the day. Cassie thought of the mason jar of harmless-looking white powder underneath the sink. All the poison in the world couldn't kill Gia. Cassie found this out, too, more recently. Right after Gia crushed her right hand, Cassie had started putting the poison in Gia's meals. With no results. None whatsoever. A poison that's supposed to practically eat the human body from the inside out. No. Gia exhibited 0 symptoms. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, megadose after megadose of the stuff. Then one morning over pancakes, came that question that nearly gave Cassie a heart attack. "Why does my food always smell different than yours?" Gia asked, wide eyes brimming with innocence. Cassie played dumb and smelled Gia's pancakes, then hers. She shrugged. Of course they did not smell different to Cassie. Even though Cassie had been putting bigger and bigger doses in Gia's meals, no human nose could detect the massive amount of antimony trioxide Cassie put in Gia's pancakes. The dose Cassie was giving Gia could kill 10 girls her size. And Cassie knew this from her experience helping her late husband with his extracurricular hobby. "It's got a metallic taste," Gia went on. "Actually, there's always been a weird taste, but it's gotten way worse the past few days." Of course it had. Cassie was now putting enough of the stuff in Gia's food to kill 10 people. But no human taste buds could taste antimony trioxide. Well, I've been putting some extra sweeteners in yours, Cassie said with a smile. Figured since you're a young girl, you'd like your food a little more tasty. Sorry if they ended up tasting, what did you say? Metallic. Gia peered at Cassie. I don't need any extra sweeteners, Gia finally said, poker-faced. You can stop wasting your time. Then finish the densely poisoned pancakes anyway. Once again with no effect. Cassie had stopped trying to poison the girl immediately. The subject of different tasting food never came up again, but Gia always smelled her food now, before she took the first bite. Oatmeal's delicious, yum, Gia said. What's for dinner anyway? Thai. Chili, Cass said softly, a small tear in her eye. Sounds muy bueno, Gia chirped, lifting the bowl and scooping the last of the oatmeal down. You can leave it, Cassie said. I'll clear the table. Much obliged, Gia said. Then she bent over, and her legs shot up perfectly straight. She hand-walked back to the master bedroom, where she had slept since she killed Jake. Cassie couldn't finish her oatmeal. She'd lost her appetite. Minutes later, Cassie found herself in the basement, at the large chest freezer, armed with a handsaw and some butcher paper. Her eyes welled up as she opened the chest freezer and saw what was left of Jake's frozen body. Basically a broken arm, a broken leg, and half of the other broken leg. His massively crippled body was almost gone. At least his suffering came to an end. The suffering certainly carried on with her, though. Despite her gnarled hand, Cassie was able to lift the whole leg and started sawing just above the knee. She had gotten quite good at this, even with her left hand, so it no longer took an eternity to saw off some of Jake for tonight's meal. Still was longer than she wanted to spend doing this, and she would rather be doing anything else. But the demon had to eat, and Jake's remains had to disappear somehow. The demon had everything all figured out, and Cassie had to follow the demon's plan, or meet one of two fates. Either die herself, or live, and face a consequence even worse than death. The saw blade began to smear red with her late husband's blood. Cassie casually glanced over at Jake's workbench, the place where Gia made her incredible escape, where she turned the tables on Jake and mangled him to death ever so slowly, breaking nearly every bone in his body with her hands. Her bare hands. Jesus, that girl was strong. Strong in a most unholy way. Finished sawing Jake's thigh from his lower leg, Cassie shut the chest freezer and wrapped the thigh in the butcher paper. Just before she left, she caressed the freezer's lid. Someday we'll be together again, she whispered. As she walked out, she couldn't ignore the smell of decaying flesh coming from somewhere under the basement. Yes, Cassie would indeed face a consequence worse than death if she didn't follow the demon's plan. And there was no way to derail it. Cassie paused. Or was there? Maybe Cassie's intention should not be focused on Sunday. Maybe her intention should be to call Pastor Willie back. Today. Gia stood under the shower a few moments longer. She just plain felt extra dirty after teaching that clown a lesson out in that abandoned lot. Like there was an extra layer of grime to wash away. After the shower, she faced the full-length mirror, towel wrapped around her middle. She stared at her face first. Her face had a youthful plumpness to it, cherubic nose, full pouty lips, long eyelashes, thin eyebrows. She'd been told she had a child's face. She wondered what her face looked like when she was a child. She always felt like she should be doing something when she looked at her face in the mirror. She was certain she wore makeup in her before life. It didn't matter now. She didn't want any more attention. And even if she did, she had no makeup to put on anyway. She wrapped another towel around her hair. She lowered her arms and noticed the veins running down the length of her bicep and forearm. She turned a little and straightened one of her arms, flexing her tricep. She ran her fingers along the huge horseshoe bulge. It felt like marble. As usual, she couldn't help notice the scars which circled each shoulder. They used to be darker, more pronounced, but recently they'd begun to blend in with the rest of her skin. Was it too much a stretch to think they had been surgically attached to her body? Maybe at the terrible place where she woke up? Maybe before that? And if so, why? She ran her right finger along the scar around the left shoulder, lifting her left arm, tracing the scar under her arm. The scars had a distinct pattern. On either side of the scar's main line were small dots, reminding Gia of the holes on a shoe you'd run a lace through. Gia did not know much about surgery, but it seemed to her these were old school stitches done by an old school surgeon. She stepped back to see how, even though they matched skin tone and texture, her arms were out of proportion with the rest of her. They weren't just big, they looked a little too long too. Whether or not they were hers or transplants, they would clearly look better on a bigger person. She almost looked like a gorilla. She squinted and hunched over a little. Yep, there it was. She made gorilla noises and jumped up and down in place. Gia shook her head. No, these couldn't be her arms. They were either salvaged from another body or grown in a lab. They could do stuff like that now. Grow body parts. Maybe that's what they did at the terrible place. But then the arms did feel so much like hers naturally. Gia and her arms almost had a relationship. They were more than just appendages, more than just extensions of her body. They had a life of their own. Sometimes Gia would be sitting there watching TV, and one of her hands would reach up and grab a fly that Gia didn't even know was there. And then there was that time with Cassie. That was weird, but she saw Cassie's hand out the corner of her eye at the same time she grabbed it and summarily crushed it. At least that's how she remembered it. Maybe her arm moved before Gia told it to. If that was the case, her arms saved her life. Outside those independent movements, her arms would also communicate with her. Like when your stomach is empty, it tells your brain you need to eat. Right now, Gia's arms were telling her they needed to be worked again. Gia figured it was time to go to her favorite place,